So I finished the story of Death Stranding 2, and I've got some non-spoilery thoughts I'd like to share about the game. But first a question. What do you do once you finish the story? Well, you could put the game down, that's a valid option, it's a story-based game after all, but I need a little bit more. You could go for 5-star connection levels with every facility, but I try to avoid obsessive completionism these days, and besides that, there are some facilities that do not deserve that 5th star. I'm looking at you, the adventurer. Stop getting lost in the wilderness. I don't want to haul your carcass halfway across Australia again. Go home and be a family man. Raise your son, who I now realize is probably around 30 years old, but he still needs his papa. What I want to do, what would be most meaningful to me, is to complete the road and rail networks of Death Stranding 2. Now, I've done a pretty good job keeping up with them throughout the game, but I do have a few facilities left that I need to finish. And then I'd like to take one big last lap all the way around Australia, talking about the game and reviewing it as I go. I've done a pretty good job of stealing materials from every facility I've visited and loading them up on the DHV Magellan, but ceramics is the sticking point. It took me way too long to realize that the Smoke Hill mine produced ceramics right in the early part of the game. Very vital. But I'm not going to bore you with watching me build the entire highway and rail network, that takes hours. So instead, editor, take me away with a montage. Now, hopefully we got the rights to use some Bob Seger for that montage. Main Street, turn the page, maybe even night moves. You know, what I don't want is for that to have been set to an ancient, public domain, goofy-sounding song. So help me God, if that was ragtime, I'm going to be pretty hacked off, fully disgruntled. But enough about that. Let's talk about the route we're going to be taking. We'll be crossing over the plate gate, getting on the highway, and taking one big, magnificent loop around this wonderful Australia. Without further ado, let's cross the portal. Hold up, I'm forgetting something. Level 2 roads. I forgot to upgrade the roads to level 2. Alright, let me fix that. Editor, remontage me, and make it snappy. Hang on a sec, do I even like level 2 roads? The holographic roof it puts over everything is kind of ugly in my view. I mean, it's nice to move a little faster. Okay, here's how it's gonna be. Some of the roads I travel on will be level 2 roads just to make this go a little faster, but some are gonna be level 1 roads so that we can see our surroundings. And I don't want to hear any disagreement about that in the comments, otherwise I am going to toss you around like pizza dough. Without further ado, let's get started. As we approach the highway to complete our last loop, I'm going to make a promise. No more cuts to the video. As a true gamer, I want to prove I've got the real gamer skills to drive in a big old circle around Australia. So from here on out, it's just going to be one take. So what overall is my review of Death Stranding 2? Well, to keep it simple, it's great. I can say that almost without reservation, I loved this game from bow to stern. It was probably my favorite game I've played in the last year or so, and I should say that I am a, fairly big fan of the Metal Gear Solid series, so perhaps I'm a bit biased. But I was hot and cold on the original Death Stranding. There were parts of it I quite liked, parts of it that were very frustrating. By the end, I had been won over, and I did enjoy it greatly. But I really experienced almost no frustration. There's a smoothness to Death Stranding 2. Starting with the graphics, it's just absolutely one of the best looking games ever made. I was constantly, it doesn't always transmit looking at it on YouTube, but it's truly a beautiful game. The story was excellent. I could say perhaps the story is one area where Death Stranding 1 was superior in some way. If you just wrote the story out, I think Death Stranding 1 is a little fresher and maybe a little more cohesive. Death Stranding 2 is more of an expansion of Death Stranding 1's story, but I think Death Stranding 2's presentation and pacing were flat out better. As we arrive at West Fort Knott, we're going to make our first transfer. We're not just using the highway, after all. We've also got to make use of the monorail. My goal is to make use of every method of conveyance that is available in Death Stranding 2, and there are several. And the monorails were something I definitely enjoyed building. You know, I think part of the reason why I really enjoy the monorails is because I come from the less than entirely great state of Kansas in the United States of America, where we do not have methods of public transportation, nor do we have mountains, hills, lakes, or even rivers. Just flat plains. So to ride on a train, to me, is pretty neat, even if it's in a video game. Should be about a 4-minute stretch here. You know what? I might... Oh, gosh, it's a little slow. I wish I could speed it up, but we can't cut the video, and my foolish editor does not know how to use the retime controls in DaVinci Resolve. Tell you what, I myself am a Doom sufferer in real life, and I do have the ability to speed up all of space-time, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right here. All right, there we go. You can't see, obviously, but I am bleeding from the nose and mouth and ears, but it's all right. It's a small price to pay to make the video a little more snappy. And I shouldn't die as long as I don't do this for too long. Otherwise, my head will explode as if I were in the movie Scanners. As I was saying, I think Death Stranding 1 and 2 both have great stories. I think I like Death Stranding 1's a little more. Death Stranding 2 just has such better pacing, and it's got really wonderful direction in many of the cutscenes. Death Stranding 1 had a few too many scenes of fake Guillermo del Toro giving you exposition in a nondescript white room, you know, and I think it got a little bit tiresome. You must understand, Sam, that The Shape of Water was just a movie. I would never approve of anyone romantically interfering with a fish. Now, I do own several aquariums, but these fish are pets for looking at. All of them are 100% unmolested, I assure you. Now let me have a look at your BB. By the way, that's not culturally insensitive because it's not a generic Mexican accent. It's a specific impression of the guy who does an impression of Guillermo del Toro in Death Stranding. And I think we would all agree that I nailed it. It was absolute perfection. Furthermore, you can't see me, so you don't know for sure that I'm not Guillermo del Toro, or the guy that does the impression of Guillermo del Toro in Death Stranding. As we get ready to pull in the F2 South Distribution Center here, we'll switch back onto the motorcycle, get ourselves back on the road. And by the way, shout out to Mr. Samson Hook, who runs this particular facility, and the powerful shot gloves he gave me, which I used for most of the game. I also liked that he looked like a perfect square of a man and taught you techniques that made you better at fighting. That just made sense to me. Yeah, the bike's behind you, genius. I really must say, building out the infrastructure truly is satisfying to me. There is something about it that's so nice, seeing the chiral printers bring up the roads and the monorails, and just having that feeling of having easier access to all of our various destinations, and knowing that you're making it easier for other players. By the way, your roads don't directly show up in other people's games, as far as I can tell, but you do make it cheaper for them to build the roads on their own. So every person who builds a road, everyone else who's in their network will have their roads be a bit cheaper. But you know, as we're driving here, I do see a problem. I myself am an unarmed porter, a man of peace. I put all that behind me. But we are coming up on a bandit camp. And, I mean, gosh, I could try to, do on-site procurement for my weaponry needs, but it just doesn't feel right to me, I'm trying to keep this run nice and peaceful, and, there's really no way here, if I want to stay on the road, but we've got to use infrastructure the whole way, so, golly. I don't know. Maybe if some handsome genius had, built out a zipline network or something so that we could just bypass it flying through the air. Oh, what do you look? What do you look at this? What's over here? Gosh, some really thoughtful person must have put this here for me. Couldn't have the video without doing a bit of ziplining after all. It's a nice bit of fun. Probably the most fun type of infrastructure in the game. In my country, it's considered somewhat gauche, or I guess effeminate, you might say, to spend public money on, public infrastructure projects. But Maybe if we had more sick-ass zip lines, it would be easier to invest in that sort of thing. But this truly is the kingly way to travel. High above the bandits, no concern whatsoever. You know, I went back and I played a little Death Stranding 1 before I did Death Stranding 2, and I think really the big difference, the thing that I think let me enjoy it more throughout the game, is the smoothness of the movement. And that's not necessarily a purely good thing for Death Stranding 2. I think a lot of the point of Death Stranding 1 was struggling through rough terrain and dealing with the challenges of moving all that cargo, but everything feels a lot smoother in 2. Yeah, you can still stumble in places. There's still some awkward treks here and there, but for the most part, the vehicles are smoother, your movement is smoother, you know, it's way fewer falls, although I must say the few falls I have had down a hill have been pretty spectacular looking. Here, we'll go ahead and get ourselves back down to the highway, although, now that I'm thinking of it, we obviously could not bring our motorcycle with us, so I guess we're going to be walking, you know? I guess the video may wind up being, 2 or 3 hours long as we slowly trek around. Only if some eminently subscribable genius left some other mode of conveyance lying around somewhere near this pylon here, and, oh, would you look at that? It's a mobile coffin. Wonderful. Back on the road indeed. No time lost. Got another bandit camp coming up on our right, but, you know, it just wouldn't be right. I'm a man of peace. I abhor violence of all sorts. I obviously have never killed a single person in any of my Metal Gear Solid runs, you know, just perfect stealth, no trace, and we're not going to change that now. The structures of these bandit camps feel a lot like the outposts in Metal Gear Solid 5. One of many things that feel a lot more tied into Metal Gear Solid than the previous installment in Death Stranding was. I should add that it was at this very camp that I had my backpack stolen by a backpack thief while I had taken off my equipment so I could clear the camp out looking for more ceramics. I chased him down, tackled him of course, but I had the option to give him the backpack after all. And I wound up doing it at some inconvenience to my own self, but I think it was in keeping with the game, which is about connection and cooperation. This lone mad mule man who just wanted some backpack to call his own. It would have been wrong not to let him keep it. But I guess then why did I feel the need to chase him down and fly through the air and just jump kick him? But I did. But, you know, he had to know that it was me deciding to give up the backpack and not him deciding to take it from me. And while I said I am a true gamer capable of going around in a big circle, I didn't say I was a perfect gamer. I didn't say I would never fall off the goddamned highway at some point and have to hump it across rough terrain. But, you know, that's why we have the magic flying coffin that floats on a wave of tar, just for these particular scenarios. Also, I hope you can see what I mean about the level 2 roads here. I mean, it looks cool to have this holographic roof thing, but it kind of dominates the screen. It's just a little too much, you know? It obscures my vision just a little bit much. The terrain is so wonderful. I know this is absolutely an accurate representation of Australia, with one big mountain in the middle and a giant lake as well, the size of the Mediterranean. But, and I would like to see it. I don't want to be distracted. You know, I see here we are coming up on one more bandit camp, and it would make a lot of sense to do some combat, you know, even though it would slow us down a little, but I don't know. I don't have any weapons. I'm a man of peace, a true porter of peace. No, I don't think this will do it all. I would need a lot of guns. Only if some prescient, sagacious, true gentleman had left a truck full of guns and explosives. Well, what do you know? They're right over there. But I don't want to slow down the video. I'll tell you what. I'm capable of moving so fast that there will appear to be visual discontinuities in it that seem like cuts, but in fact are just your eyes failing to keep up with my Bruce Lee-like speed. Once again, my apologies if the speed was simply too much for your eyes to handle and that appeared like a great deal of cuts were made. But another camp of guys, soundly handled with less than lethal violence. Non-violent methods, really. Absolutely no hurting or killing whatsoever. Very, very safe. But let's talk about the combat in Death Stranding 2. Combat, despite being pretty easy, I would say is tremendously fun. There's a great variety. The feel and animations are all great. Shooting is so much better than in Death Stranding 1, where it felt very just clunky and boring. And I'm not certain that combat should even be in the game. Let me explain. So Kojima's got obviously kind of a conflicting experience with violence in his games. Metal Gear Solid is clearly an anti-war, anti-nuke, anti-militarism type series, right? The highest way to play Metal Gear Solid is to avoid killing anybody whatsoever, and to avoid even having to tranquilize anybody, just to use creative stealth methods to avoid combat as much as possible. However, there still is just an incredible variety of interesting ways to kill people. When I got Metal Gear Solid 2, I can't tell you how many times I reloaded in the tanker section just to experiment with novel ways of killing people. It's a little bit like the saying by, I believe, Francois Truffaut, that there can never be an anti-war movie. Just any director worth their salt making a war movie, no matter how strongly the anti-war message is in there, is just going to make scenes that are dynamic and interesting, and it's just going to make the war seem appealing, all right? Unless you just made a 2-hour movie of guys just getting dysentery in a muddy ditch. So Kojima is absolutely great. And when I say Kojima, I mean Kojima Productions. I mean the whole team, right? I don't really buy the auteur theory for video games, certainly, but the whole team are great at making fun, novel, interesting combat systems. Metal Gear Solid 5 is still one of the most ridiculous sandboxes of violence that you could possibly have. And it's a weird conflict because it does make the killing interesting and compelling, fun. In Metal Gear Solid 5, of course you should avoid killing people if you really want to master the game, but my goodness, there's just so many options. There's so many variety of things you can do to obliterate various goons populating the bases. I think there's a way you can justify it in the story of that game to yourself, but it's a conflict. And so I think that obviously sort of the Metal Gear Solidness just sort of carries over into Death Stranding 2 as we take a little break to do a little vehicle exchange. The pickup off-roader is just a bit slow. I wanted to get it in for the video, but I think it's time we transfer back to a bike. What idiot left their bike in the middle of the road? No, it was me again. As I was saying, in the world of Death Stranding, Kojima has baked in a reason why you can't kill anybody, right? Any human that dies is at risk of creating a void out, of literally becoming a nuke and destroying a large portion of the world, right? It is destructive to the fabric of reality itself to kill someone in Death Stranding. So, most, if not quite all of the weapons in Death Stranding 2 are non-lethal. They just knock guys out, even though they feel and they look like violent weapons, like the machine gun, etc. And I just think it's a little bit at odds with the nature of the story, being about connections, being about knitting people back together into some sort of cohesive whole, To me, the real essence of the game, and it is about 80-90% of the game, is about traveling, about transporting goods, about building the infrastructure and the roads and connecting the world together. And the combat, to me, as fun as it is, and I really do enjoy it. And look, I'm not a high-minded purist who wishes most games had no violence in them whatsoever. I like violent video games, I'm sorry. But to me, this is almost a game that maybe could have done without it. I mean, the story requires confrontation between Sam and Higgs, And that tends to lead towards violence. I just wonder if it might not have been a little better to have some kind of system of porter-based combat, focused more on using cargo as weapons, melee, etc., even though I must say I do enjoy the guns. Now, as for criticism of the game, quibbles, issues that I may have with it, they're not that many, but they do exist. I will say, as much as I do enjoy the game, and as much as I am a lover of Metal Gear Solid, I could have done with a fewer references, right? I didn't need to hear "kept you waiting," huh? I mean, it's an odd thing. This is a very Metal Gear Solid game. I mean, arguably the first Death Stranding was too, but to me it did feel fairly separate. This one is really, to me, full of references to that series. And it's a bit of an odd thing, because Kojima famously has been trying to get away from Metal Gear Solid since Metal Gear Solid 2. Every game was going to be his last, and he just kept getting roped in. He's clearly ambivalent, right? He was ejected from Konami with very little fanfare, and you would think he would be sort of more excited to move past it. But, yeah, I mean, he obviously still loves it, but I think it's just a few too many references throughout the game, or just, winks and nods to Metal Gear Solid. And, he's going to make another stealth action game in Physint, and my God, how many references to Metal Gear Solid are we going to have in that game? Another issue I have, and it's more of a quibble, is the length of the game. I really appreciated the Metal Gear Solid series for fitting right into what I think is the ideal game length, which is in that sort of 12 to 20 hours rate. Like all the original Metal Gear Solids up till 5 were just perfect. About 15-hour games. It's about the same time commitment as a season of television, right? And it's just, to me, the right length of time for both, as we stopped to double-check the map and didn't want to take a wrong turn here. It would make a bad video. But that 15-hour length is just perfect. It's the right amount of story, it's the right amount of gameplay, and it's easy to go back and revisit a game like that, as I have done with Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 in particular multiple times. But I think it didn't grate on me. Metal Gear Solid 5 obviously was a similarly length game, another open world type game. Death Stranding 2, I probably put somewhere in the 70 to 80 hour mark in, which is a pretty substantial commitment, especially nowadays, but I was still worth it. But I do tend to prefer, just philosophically, games that are either snappy 15-hour experiences or more open-ended affairs that is not about completing the game per se. But really this is a quibble, because Death Stranding definitely earns its runtime. But beyond that though, it would really be beat-by-beat minor story quibbles here and there, and I'm not going to go through all of those. And I don't really get too upset over that. Kojima is a maximalist, which means that he will typically include things in the game that did not need to be in there, but he will never fail to include something that needed to be in there. That's just how it goes. There's going to be a lot of ideas and concepts thrown at the game, and some of them are not going to quite fit. And you can really stick on those, that can stick in your craw, and you can make a big deal of it. It can ruin the game for you, or you can just move on. There's a particular dance number that I think I understand the meaning of, but to many, I think will, feel a little odd. But I try not to object to it. The film director Howard Hawks once said that a good movie is 3 good scenes and no bad ones, right? Meaning it's not about everything fitting together absolutely perfectly. It's not a great movie doesn't have to have every single scene be perfect. You're just looking to have enough good scenes in there. And there are a lot of good scenes and bits and gameplay segments here. If we make it to the terminal knot, we'll go ahead and transfer first off into the ceiling, and secondly, onto another bout with the monorail. But yeah, you just accept some things shouldn't have been in there, but it's all right. And there wasn't anything nearly as bad as the Mario and Princess Beach scene from Death Stranding 1. That really hurt me. That was a thing where when I was playing it, I remember audibly saying out loud, like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. It was brutal. And I don't know if it's a translation error. It's a pun. It would be, I mean, Kojima, as far as I know, does not speak English. So I don't know how that was included in the first place. There was no Princess Beach moment. So I'm good. There is a moment I would like to talk about. And it's not a problem for me, but it's interesting. Now, this would be a bit of a spoiler. Not a story spoiler, more of a moment spoiler, but it does occur towards the end of the game. Tell you what, I'm going to put up a picture, or my editor, I should say, will put up a picture of Léa Seydoux. And as long as you can see the most perfect face in the world, you are safe from the spoiler. Once it fades away, we're going to move into a bit of a spoiler thing. It won't ruin the story for you, but it will ruin a moment. So this occurs at the end of the game, when Sam and Higgs are having their showdown. And they've got their shirts off, and they're hacking away at each other with electric guitars. This in itself should not be surprising. Sam and Higgs were always going to fight. And knowing it's a Kojima game, it's going to end with a couple of shirtless men either fighting with their hands or katanas or guitars. In this case, it's guitars. And they're fighting one another, and it's over the top, it's ludicrous, but that's all fine. That's par for the course. You expect that. But at this moment in time, Higgs starts playing his guitar instead of just hitting Sam with it, and he challenges Sam to a shred-off. And you can decline. You can decline the shred-off. You do not have to engage in it. But if you do, and I imagine everyone will, you have a little guitar contest, and it's amiable, right? It's the sort of moment that would make sense if these were sort of rivals who respected each other. But that does not fit with the story of the game. Higgs is a solipsistic maniac who's seeking to obliterate existence itself. And furthermore, not to go into too much of a spoiler, even though it occurs early in the game, but I still won't mention it, Higgs does things that are unforgivable. Sam would never get along with Higgs. So it's an odd moment, right? But it's really, I guess, to me, more of a fourth wall break. It's like the fiction of the game breaks down for a moment, and we have this odd, guitar off between our protagonist and antagonist. It doesn't make sense strictly from a plot point of view, but that's okay. I objected to it for a moment. For a moment, just a brief nanosecond as it was happening, I said, oh, what are we doing here? But then I understood. It's about recognizing the sort of, I guess, the artifice of the game. It's a wink and a nod to reality, and it's about, imagining if these characters were not fated to fight each other for the sake of the game's story, but instead were just people connecting over music. The game is about connections, and music's a big part of that. Music is not just the score, of course. Music is a way for Kojima to try and connect with the player. That's what it's about when you're out on one of your deliveries. And as you get closer to your facility, so the music will kick in, and the band's name and the song's name will appear on the screen. That's Kojima's just telling you, hey, this is not about just setting the tone for this moment in time. I just think this is an interesting band. You should check them out, right? Music is it transcends boundaries, language, culture. Music is very primal, and it is a way for people to connect with each other, a way to build community. I've never been big on live music, but it is a unique experience to go to a live concert, to experience the same emotions as a couple thousand other people, as you all hear songs that you are all fans of, presumably. So that's what that moment is to me. It's saying hey, let's just forget that we exist in a game and a narrative for a moment. Wouldn't it be cool if we all could just sort of jam out, man? It's the hippy-dippy connectivity stuff that is at the core of Death Stranding 2. And moments like those can either just ruin the experience for you, or you can roll with them. In this case, I was able to roll with them. Again, it's certainly by far not even close to the most fourth wall breaking moment in a Kojima game, not by a country mile. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Clear away the picture, return the picture of, let's say, to make it balanced for the genders, Mads Mikkelsen. Again, now you can see another beautiful face, you're safe again. The spoilers are over. I should say that's another thing Death Stranding 1 has over Death Stranding 2. I'm a big Mads Mikkelsen fan. He's one of my favorite actors. I enjoy seeing him in things. So, miss seeing him. I think Luca Marinelli, I believe, is the name, did a very fine job as sort of the Cliff replacement. That is, I guess, another thing you could quibble with, is that the structure of the game, right, is very similar between Death Stranding 1 and 2. That's how Kojima tends to work. He finds a structure, he tends to repeat it for quite a while. Very common in Metal Gear Solid, but yeah, similar structure between 1 and 2, even though the stories are different enough. Lastly, I suppose we should talk about the themes of the game, just a little bit. The strandness of it all. Death Stranding 1 is one of the ultimate Mandela effect pieces of media. It seems like a definitive piece of COVID-era media, but of course it came out in 2019, 6 months before COVID. It was made in response to rising nationalism, not COVID, but also the general trend towards increasing personal isolation and alienation. And I certainly was aware of those trends in 2019. I have eyes, after all. But in 2025, I feel it much more strongly. It's easy to think of trends in culture as being something that affects other people, and to regard yourself as being, still the same. But I'm not still the same. I am affected just as much as anyone else is. And I think that's why Death Stranding 2 just hit me a little harder. Death Stranding 2 feels a little bit more personal. The themes of Death Stranding are not buried deep beneath the surface. They're right there. It's about connection, building connections. But there's sort of two varieties of connections. Hit a quick jump right here. All right, didn't screw it up. There's sort of the false connections of, say, the chiral network, representing, obviously, the internet, online life generally, which is a convenience for everyone who gets connected to it, but also has negative consequences in both Death Stranding 1 and 2. And then there's the deeper, more real connections, the physical connections that Sam makes by physically carrying hundreds of pounds of bulky materials over treacherous terrain at great personal risk to himself. And that's what it sort of feels like, trying to connect with people in the real world, in meat space in 2025. It is a uniquely heavy and disturbing time to be alive. You really feel it quite deeply. But Death Stranding, while addressing these things, feels like a very hopeful game, like a very warm game in many ways. I felt that, and I appreciated that. And to me, that's why it's been one of the most enjoyable experiences I've had. And I think it was all there in the first game too, but I guess I just needed a little more time for, real life to wear away at me, just a little bit more, to really appreciate it. If anything, the smoothness and the slickness of Death Stranding 2 may be a minor detriment to the themes of the game, even as they benefit the fun of it. The struggle is a big part of forming those connections. And you have to connect with people before you can cooperate. As a coda, let me just say thank you for making it to the end of the video. You're a trooper for putting up with my rambling. If you're a longtime subscriber, you will of course notice this is not like my typical videos, which are almost exclusively about UFC 5 and its mechanics. And if you are a longtime subscriber, you are well in your rights to leave a comment where you tell me, hey, Bozo, Stick to UFC 5. Talk about body sidekicks or something. That's quite fine. If, on the other hand, you did enjoy this video and its departure from my normal style, please feel free to say so. And if you're not a subscriber and you've not seen any of my other videos, well, you've made it quite far. You may as well press that subscribe button. But you too, I would welcome you. Please leave a comment as to whether or not this was a waste of your time or a decent video. It helps me a lot. I've been wanting to talk about some other games and other things for a while now, and I'm not sure if I should do it on this channel or start a new one, so your feedback's very helpful. I really enjoyed making this video, and almost as much as I enjoyed Death Stranding 2. Keep on keeping on, and don't forget to drop a like.